What's up, everybody? My name is Alex McGregor, and I know I haven't been making videos for a little bit, but we got a really cool one coming today. We're gonna take our Olympus OMD EM1 MK3 and head up to Alaska. Oh, and if you haven't noticed yet, I got a drone. So we're out here at the coolest place I think we've ever been. We're at Brooks River in Katmai National Park, and I brought along my Olympus OMD EM1 MK3, as well as my 300mm f4 and my 40-150 f2.8. And right back there is the legendary Brooks Falls, where you get those classic pictures of the salmon jumping as they're going upriver to spawn, and these amazing coastal brown bears who are catching these salmon and getting fattened up for winter. So there's a couple of shots that I really want to get here. One is a classic salmon jumping into the bear's mouth. And for that, on the EM1 MK3, I'm gonna be using the ProCapture mode. And for a little bit how the ProCapture mode works, we're gonna go to Alex on the computer, who can give you all the details on that. Man, that's a pretty sweet hat, isn't it? Oh, looking good up there. I really wish I was back in Alaska right now, but I am coming to you from the computer to explain a little bit about what ProCapture mode is and why it's so effective. So ProCapture mode essentially allows a photographer to look back in time after they've pressed that shutter button. Olympus does this by once you half press your shutter button, it is constantly reading, recording, and deleting images out of some temporary memory bank. And once you fully press that button, it will record however many images you tell it to before that shutter press to your SD card. So when I was going to photograph these fish jumping into the mouths, it's super hard to know when the bear's actually going to catch the fish, because the fish are jumping kind of all over the place and the bears miss the majority of them. So if I was just like spraying at every single fish, I would get a ton of pictures that I really didn't need. So instead, I was just watching the bear, and I have my shutter button half pressed down, and once it catches the fish, then I fully press that shutter button, and the internal memory of this camera is going to write every image before the fish actually gets into the mouth of the bear to the SD card. Now on ProCapture mode, you have two different settings. You have the ProCapture High and the ProCapture Low. And these kind of go along with the silent shooting modes of low and high. The low ProCapture mode is limited to 18 frames per second, but it does have the advantage of autofocus. So if you're photographing something like a bird flying at you and you want to get maybe the wings at a super specific position, you can use that ProCapture mode low, and it will track the bird and record every little detail of its flight. The ProCapture mode high maxes out at 60 frames a second, which is incredible, but it's limited by not having autofocus. So you really have to understand what your shooting situation requires. In the Alaska images, for the most part, I was on ProCapture High because those bears were standing still. They're just kind of moving their head back and forth a little bit. I didn't need to autofocus, and I could get every little specific moment of that fish jumping into the mouth. So now I'm going to show you on the camera how to set up your ProCapture mode and how to dial in some specific settings that will change based on what you're actually trying to photograph. So in your menu, if you go down to that little spoke looking guy, which is your custom menu, and go to C1, you'll see your sequential shooting modes. Here we have low and high. If you click your right arrow, you can go down to your ProCapture mode and click your right arrow again. Now this is where you can really dial in what you want your camera to do. So your max frames per second on the low mode is topped out at 18, but if you don't want all 18, you can choose 15 or 10 frames per second. Now here's where it gets really interesting. There's the pre-shutter frames, and we can click over on that. We can see 18 is what I had it set at, but you can go all the way up to 35. And this is the amount of frames that will be taken before you press your shutter. And then you can set your frame count limiter to really whatever you want it to be. You can set it up to 99 here, or you can set it all the way to off. So this is a good thing to do, to have some sort of limiter on there, because you might hold down the shutter button longer than you want and just fill up your memory card full of these images. So setting your limiter here is important. And if we go back by hitting the menu button and then hit the menu button again, we can go to our high settings. And in here we can set our max frames per second all the way up to 60 frames per second. And then the same thing, we can set our frame count limiter and our pre-shutter frames. I would say set a lot of the pre-shutter frames. That's really what the main point of using the ProCapture mode is, but it really is going to depend on your shooting situation, your subject, what the action is. But it's just really nice to know that all of these options are there, so we can dial it in to be exactly what we want. Now, to actually activate your ProCapture mode, you're going to press this button on the top here, which will give you your different drive speed options. So we can do single live. We scroll over here, we have ProCapture high and ProCapture low. Just click it and you're ready to go. So really easy to access once you have it set up properly. It's something you probably want to do before you're actually out there in the field, to set those pre-shutter frames and everything like that. But when you're in the field, it's very easy just to hit that top button, go to your high or low, and start shooting. So we're going to be using that ProCapture mode on these bears, but another image that isn't quite as common, I want to get a little bit of a long exposure with the waterfall moving and the bears still, because they're not super active. They're just kind of sitting, waiting for their right opportunity, like a proper fisherman would. So I'm gonna be using the Live ND feature on the Olympus camera to get a nice long exposure. And again, we're gonna jump to Office Alex to explain how that works. Now the Live ND mode, as the name suggests, replicates what the effect of adding an ND filter to the front of your lens would be. It does this by taking several images in a row and combining them all in the camera to create that blurry waterfall effect. So it's capturing the motion of the waterfall over the full exposure time and creating one final image out of it. And again, there's different options and different settings that we can use to create the different effects that we want. The camera offers different options all the way from 1 stop of exposure all the way up to 5 stops of exposure. And it can even give you a preview of what your image is going to look like right in the camera by simulating it on the back of the screen for you. Now, the one kind of annoying thing is that there are some shutter speed restrictions based on which stop of ND filter you want to have on there. So when I was out there with the bears, I had it on what Olympus is calling ND4, which is considered to be 2 stops of ND exposure. And I had this on there because at ND4, you're limited to a 15th of a second exposure time. That's the max that you can go. If we go down to ND8, which is 3 stops of exposure, you're limited to 1/8 of a second. Now, the IBIS in these cameras is great, but all the way zoomed out on that 40 to 150, I didn't really trust that I could hold the camera steady enough for a 1/8 of a second exposure. Perhaps I could have, and that's definitely something that we should all test out before heading out there. But when I was in that spot, in that moment, I was thinking, I don't want to waste these images and this experience by having a little bit of camera shake. So I decided to go with that ND4 setting. To set up the Live ND shooting mode, you want to access your menu and go to shooting menu number 2. Then the bottom option there is Live ND shooting. You tap your right arrow to turn it on and off. And if you go down to on, you'll tap your right arrow again to adjust your settings. Here we can turn our live view simulation on or off, and we can also adjust the amount of ND we want. Right here we can choose between ND2 up to ND32. Again, I was using ND4 for my shots out at the bears. So let's get back out to Alaska and see what I was able to capture with the ND mode. Okay, so there's no bears up on top of the falls right now catching the fish, so we're gonna take this opportunity to test out that Live ND. You can see a representation of what your final image is gonna look like before you ever even take it. So come on in and check out what that actually looks like. So if you get nice and close up on this screen, you can see how the water looks all blurry. So it's giving me kind of an idea of what the final image is going to look like before I even ever push the button. And the bear, let's hope he stands a little bit still, but we can see what we get here. All right, we'll review the image and see just from hand holding the picture, we get a really nice blurry waterfall, and you see that rock is completely sharp. Going over to the bear, maybe he moved his head a little bit, but that's still a really cool effect, and it's an interesting way that you can get something unique from one of the most famous photography places in the world. Not everyone is going to have the ability, because tripods are not allowed on the platform, to get this nice long exposure because they don't have Olympus. Here's a few more photos I got up at the falls using the Live ND. So due to some technical difficulties, I didn't have a chance to walk through and really explain and show the ProCapture mode in live action, but let's just sit down and look at my favorite sequence that I got with the ProCapture mode, and you guys can see how it works. So we're going to jump into Lightroom right now. This is my favorite sequence that I got in Alaska. You see this bear is perfectly positioned and captures that fish really nicely. So when I was up there, I had 10 of the pre-shutter frames selected. So all of the images right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's also 4. Let's go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These were all taken before I pressed the shutter button. This frame here, the 11th frame in, is where I actually hit the shutter button because I knew that this bear had actually caught the fish. So if I didn't do that, I would have missed out on this frame and this frame, which I think are my favorite, as the fish is still in the air, but it's super obvious that he's going to get caught by that bear. And this is the one that I've posted to Instagram. It's the one I've sold. It's my favorite, one of my favorite shots I got during the entire trip. So what was it? There, I clicked the shutter button, and then it captured all those ones before and the rest of the sequence of the fish's last moments. It is kind of sad up there sometimes, but so yeah, Olympus, the ProCapture mode works incredibly well. It always is really easy to set up once you have your shutter frames set and your post shutter frame set. You just flip it over like you're changing into a high sequential mode or the low sequential mode, and it's right there for you. So after watching all of that, what did we really learn? Well, I think it comes down to the question of what tool is the best for taking out there to Alaska to do the job of capturing footage of these bears. And I'm fortunate enough to have at my disposal a Canon R5, a really amazing professional full frame camera. And I have some really nice lenses to go with it. So that begs the question if taking that Olympus with me to Alaska this coming summer really is the best choice. And I have to tell you, after watching the clips that we just looked at and after really using this gear, I'm never leaving my Olympus camera at home again. Things like the ProCapture Mode, the Live ND, the Live Composite, the size and compactness of it, and the image quality makes me really, really confident that this is the best camera system to take with. Now, a little bit about this drone, and don't worry, I'm not going to turn into a drone channel, but I just picked up, used the DJI Air 2S, and I'm really excited to use it. So right now I'm just kind of playing with the master shots to see what they do for me. Wrapping up this video, always, if you could give me those thumbs up, comments, likes, and please subscribe for more. We have some more stuff coming out about the trip to Alaska. Links down below, affiliate and others, and I will catch you guys on the next video.